Hey my beauties, welcome. It's Viv here, your holistic stress coach and meditation teacher, bringing you the wellness and the woo-woo together. All right, so I was doing some research and found this study that I want to break down for you because it's really interesting. It has a different take on specifically hypertension, high blood pressure, specifically in Black women. And because of my coaching, I was like investigating what are the most common illnesses in women and then specifically in Black women. And I mean, of course I knew in general, but I wanted some science. Okay. So, all right. So it's a bit depressing. All right. I'm laughing, but that's just, laughing so you don't cry. So the prevalence of hypertension, you'll see me looking at my screen, looking at this study. The prevalence of hypertension in Black folks is among the highest in the world. So for Black women, 46% of Black women experience what's called stage 2 hypertension, which is a reading equal or greater than 140/90, which I know that sounds really high, And it's 42% of Black men. So more Black women are suffering, but it's pretty close. It's a race you don't want to win, right? So 42% of Black men are in stage 2. And so because of these higher rates, right, of the stage 2 hypertension, this study is saying that Black women have greater rates of cardiovascular disease and stroke, right? And we kind of know this anecdotally, So the author, I think he was just interested in what would be holding specifically Black women in this case back from adhering to lifestyle modifications, which again is where I'm really interested in, and also taking their medication, And so there were issues with that. So this study, it's 3 people, Mr. Abel, Talisa Spikes, and Denise Greer, So 3 folks interested in this put this study together. Or they were thinking that stigma has something to do with lower adherence to, the lifestyle interventions and taking the meds, including taking the meds. Okay. So he's like, maybe there's a stigma. So I would just want to go through that because it's really interesting. A couple of things came up from the study. I'll put the link below if you really, like if you're a nurse or something and you're really interested, But there were 5 themes that came up. I'm going to read you what the 5 themes are. One, and from the data they got from the women themselves, desire to get control was a theme. Shame and embarrassment was a theme. Obesity characterizations. I'll break it down a little more. Stereotype threats. And lastly, disrupted normality. Also, the younger participants, so younger at being diagnosed with high blood pressure, they were more vocal about feeling stigma versus the older participants who didn't view stigma as problematic. And the conclusion, I'll tell you now what the conclusion of the study was that hypertension has a stigma around it that could potentially deter Black women, especially from adhering to their treatment. And so they're proposing that more research is needed. But let's go through what the women were saying is going through their mind and affecting their behaviors in terms of getting diagnosed with hypertension. And before I go any further, and to me, this is good news. The World Health Organization and the American Heart Association identify hypertension as highly prevalent, but also the most preventable disease that requires lifestyle modifications such as healthy diet, weight management, and moderate levels of physical activity. Because hypertension is preventable in most cases, clients may experience feelings of guilt and shame with thoughts that they are to blame for their chronic condition, So that's where the stigma comes in, So let's just go through the issues that came up. So theme number 1 was desire to get control. In both the group, so some of the group didn't believe there was much stigma around getting diagnosed, and some did. I'm just going to mush it together because it's going to be hard to keep going back and forth, but they really all expressed a desire to get their high blood pressure under control, obviously, right? They wanted to get it under control. They felt frustration in their inability, to like self-manage. One person wrote, I hate that I have it, but I'm working on controlling it and a better lifestyle. Another person talked about the weight, that their weight is causing their issues, if I can stick to a weight loss plan, etc. I'm getting, I guess, a sense of struggle, right? Theme number 2 that came up from the questionnaires was shame and embarrassment. Obviously, negative emotions, not very helpful, right? Shame and embarrassment. The ones who seemed like they had less shame around it, they got it later in life, okay? So in the non-stigma believing group, the group that doesn't believe there's a stigma about it, several participants noted that hypertension should be discussed openly with no shame or embarrassment, okay? These are the people who didn't think there was a stigma, okay? But younger, as I said, younger participants were more vocal about there being a stigma. Older participants did not view stigma as problematic because the hypertension occurred during older adulthood, where it seems like more like normal. The group that felt that there was a stigma, they expressed, shame about taking medication. And I feel that could be anything, though. Honestly, any sort of medication, there's this sort of, you just don't want people to know your private business, right? Yeah, participants expressed feelings of shame, failure, and discouragement. And some of them said, and I'll paraphrase, I feel shame because it shows poor health. I don't take care of myself like I should. Another person felt they didn't do all they could to prevent the high blood pressure. So there's a lot of blaming. The young adults were also annoyed because they were being told to modify their lifestyle at a young age, and that felt really impactful for them. Like they didn't feel good about that, right? Because they viewed high blood pressure as something older people have. And then obesity was the third theme, obesity characterization. So what does that mean? It describes participants, since obesity is a visible condition, where individuals are victims of stigma with negative stereotypes and discrimination that further complicate the blood pressure control. Participants from like I said, I'm just going to mush the two groups together. One group didn't feel there was much stigma, the other group did. Even the ones that are the non-stigma group are expressing that being overweight puts them in gets them some negative, people are uninformed, that it's not only eating foods with sodium. I think people feel that if you're overweight, you automatically have high blood pressure. That's what some of their comments. Others were saying most people associate high blood pressure with being overweight, and some negative thoughts about that. They were feeling like it had a negative impact if they were overweight and how people perceive them when they had high blood pressure. Now, the stereotype threat is something that was interesting to me. I'm like, what does that mean? So stereotype threat refers to the threat of being viewed through the lens of a negative stereotype. So stereotype threat, or the fear of doing something that would inadvertently confirm a stereotype, okay? So because hypertension is so prevalent, some participants in the non-stigma group, they didn't believe that there was a stigma. They stated it was normal for Black people to have hypertension. So that's interesting, and that is kind of sad. Because I think your beliefs, your actions all tie together. So if you believe, it's kind of just normal to have it, right? One person said, no stigma. Most of the people I know have high blood pressure. I believe it's seen as the norm, especially in the Black community. All right, that was one group. But the group that believed there was a stigma had different thoughts on it. They believe that some people think high blood pressure is all about the way you eat. Some think it's heredity. Others think they don't need medication. My issues are stress and food. Which are really intimately tied together. I just want to stop here and say that if you watch this far, thank you. I think what I'm hearing in the voices of the women who participated in this study, I want to say it was about 90 women started the study. There's a lot of blaming themselves. I think an underappreciation of how much stress is having an impact on the hypertension. Like that's what I get from reading through this is I think that Black women especially aren't giving weight to the amount of stress they're under, exacerbating the high blood pressure, along of course with other things. And because I think if we can give more attention to the fact that we're under constant and even unrelenting stress, unless we have a way to cope with it, then it is almost like the normal outcome, right? Someone else said in the stigma group, the stigma believing group, I want to change my diet, especially salt. Oh, I was to change my diet, especially salt, because I'm African American. I felt I was asked the question. I don't cook or put salt on my food. Okay, so they felt like the doctor just assumed, oh, you black people, you put so much salt on your food. And they took that, but I think it's a good doctor, right? I don't know how they said it though, but it's a good doctor who talks to you about how you can take control of different things. So I think that, it's tough for doctors, right? Somebody else said hypertension often carries with it the stigma that you're erratic in your temperament. People assume you don't take care of your health. Okay, and the fifth theme that came up in this study of high blood pressure in Black women and whether they felt there was like stigma about it was making them not take better care of it. The fifth theme was disrupted normality. So, okay, what does that mean? The diagnosis can be traumatic with lifestyle changes and strict adherence to medication causing disrupted normality. Okay, so yeah, your normal life changes, right? Because you're told to make lifestyle changes, okay, and to take your medication, okay. So although some clients may successfully adjust, others may not, resulting in a constant struggle to maintain their blood pressure. So the non-stigma group, they didn't believe in it, wanted to be free of their hypertension, and said things like, I don't like taking medication. I would just rather have normal blood pressure. I mean, that's obvious, right? Similarly, though, those in the stigma believing group struggled with their new normality. There were certain foods you can't eat, activities may be limited. Somebody else said, yet another hindrance, where others have to consider, make provisions for me when we plan things together. So again, I do hear a lot of self-blame. I hear a lot of shame, and that's not helpful, that it's not gearing up to make these changes, all right? The main finding in this study is that 40% of the Black women in this study felt, 40%, that's pretty high, felt that stigma in such areas as diet, weight, exercise, physical activity, self-care, medication taking, stress, whatever, that impacted their ability to maintain their blood pressure, to control their blood pressure. Participants described feeling stigmatized for various reasons, with statements that reflected self-stigma. I feel shame, it's embarrassing, I hate that I have to, why can't you get it together, and perceived social stigma, that how people are thinking of them. Most people associate, and then, like I said, some of them said with obesity. I think people feel, people judge. These were some of their statements. The study, he says that 75% of the participants were highly educated, middle and upper income Black women. In the past, it was thought that lower socioeconomic status was the strongest determinant of poor health. But unlike whites, higher rates of hypertension persist among Blacks regardless of socioeconomic status. You think lower socioeconomic class is the strongest determinant of poor health for a variety of obvious reasons, right? But again, I'm going to repeat, this is the key, but unlike in the white population, higher rates of hypertension persist among Blacks regardless of socioeconomic status. That really sucks. Okay, so hence, when Blacks achieve a higher socioeconomic status, they are not immune, and then he goes on to name, and I'm going to read it to you, they are not immune to perpetual experiences with stigma, discrimination, and marginalization, that, this is the author now, that trigger biological processes involving the sympathetic nervous system and inflammatory responses. And again, that's where I come in, because I do think that what we can do, especially in the Black community, is get more focus on stress reduction. So not just like telling the women what they have to do. This is the pill you take. You have to lose weight. Don't eat this, don't eat that. I'm saying under all of these behaviors that need modification, right? The reason these women are struggling, they're saying, the study is saying stigma, but I believe, from what I've seen and experienced as a Black woman, but also, just observationally of others, that stress, unaddressed stress, is a huge part of why they can't get some of the positive things that would help them. They can't sustain it and initiate it. But he's saying that with 40% of Black women believing stigma impacts their hypertension, it needs to be looked at more, and maybe there's a way to decrease the sense of stigma and therefore get people to do the steps that would help them. If you or somebody you love is going through this, consider sending them to work with me, because like I said, the stress part we really can get control over, and how to deal with stress. And again, a lot of these practices, for a variety of reasons, haven't gotten out into the Black community yet. Things like mindfulness, things like relaxation, methods that really can make a big difference in controlling the stress and retraining the nervous system, right? So it doesn't have to be just medication and just like, I'm gonna fight with my diet. In fact, mindfulness has been shown, one of the things that I teach typically when I do like a mini retreat, I call them, which is just like a weekend 4-hour retreat you do at home. One of the things I do is a meditation, a food meditation, which sounds odd, but you basically really make eating meditative, and you pay attention, right? You practice it. So it's like mindfulness of eating. Mindfulness can definitely help in all the different struggles. One, the sense of self-esteem can be helped, right? Especially you're dealing with obesity and you think people are judging, and some probably are. So yes, the mental health, the anxiety, again, just the stress in our bodies, training ourselves to be able to stay more relaxed. So rather than trying to change the outside, which of course we can do, we can change our response. So I'd love to work with you. The link is below to a page where you can read more info and coach with me one-on-one. So it's private. Nobody's seeing what we do, nobody's watching, and I can really tailor the mindfulness practices, teaching you the relaxation and the mindfulness and the acupressure points that literally can help with things like high blood pressure, okay? It's a whole package and it's a whole protocol. So again, click the link below to work with me, and your comments, I really appreciate that. Put them below. All right, be well.